Hi there, Steve Coffin here to talk about language learning. Remember, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe. Today I want to talk about what I consider to be the most important language skill, and that is comprehension. All right? Now, there are language measurements of success or of level, and I've often said that your vocabulary, and primarily your passive vocabulary, is the best indicator of your level, at least of your potential level, because you need words, all right? But in terms of a skill, to me, comprehension is the most important. And I'm going to explain why using a number of different examples. This came to me actually while I was watching a movie. It was on TV. It was a Danish-Swedish cooperative production, and people were speaking Swedish and Danish. But they understand each other. And sometimes the Dane has to slow down a little bit because Danish is harder for the Swedes to understand than vice versa. And I started thinking, there are a number of these kinds of situations where people will speak two different languages and communicate very effectively. Ukraine is a perfect example. Many people there are quite bilingual, speak Russian and Ukrainian. Some people don't speak Ukrainian, but they understand Ukrainian perfectly well. So it's not uncommon to see people speaking, and one person speaks Ukrainian, the other speaks Russian, and they're both communicating. It's always been somewhat strange to me, for example, that there are ministers of the Ukrainian government who never speak Ukrainian, but they understand it. And there are certain politicians who will be interviewed on Ukrainian television, and the questioner speaks Ukrainian and the answer comes back in Russian. There's not a problem. So I think of other similar language pairs, like Spanish and Portuguese. When I was working on my Portuguese, I was listening to certain Portuguese podcasts from Portugal. And if they have a Spaniard on there, the Spaniard just speaks Spanish. And the audience, who are from Portugal, will understand him. It doesn't go quite as easily the other way. But the point is that there are situations, and I would imagine the same is true insofar as Arabic is concerned. I don't know Arabic, but I gather that at some level they understand each other or they don't. I don't know. But if, for example, if I were to go to Denmark, I would have trouble understanding. If I were to focus, and because we now have Danish at Link, I would spend a few weeks listening to content, looking up the words, get myself familiar to the sound of Danish. I could go to Denmark, understand everything that was said, and speak to them in Swedish, and I wouldn't have a problem. Similarly, throughout Latin America, if Spanish speakers were to put a little effort into developing the ability to understand Portuguese, again, granted, the Brazilian Portuguese is easier to understand than the Portuguese from Portugal, but very quickly they could go to Brazil, and if people in Brazil put a little effort into understanding Spanish, then they could communicate using two languages. So at least at that level, comprehension is enough for people to achieve communication because the languages themselves are so similar. You could say the same about Mandarin and Cantonese. I was at a reception the other evening, and there was a student there from China who'd been living in Vancouver, and she said, "Oh, Cantonese is so difficult to learn, it's more difficult than French." Yeah, not true at all. If a Mandarin speaker wants to be able to understand Cantonese, the vocabulary is 95% the same. It doesn't take much effort. Of course, in all of these situations, there's this element of the will. Do you really want to understand it? A lot of Cantonese speakers who don't speak Mandarin very well understand Mandarin. So this is just talking about communication between these sort of similar pairs of languages. Now, if we are learning a language that's not similar, for example, I'm learning Greek right now, and my goal with Greek is to understand, because I can say simple things in Greek. I can have simple conversations in Greek. That's not difficult because it's a controlled environment. I talk about things that I am familiar with. I use a limited range of vocabulary, which means that the person I'm talking to, my italki tutor is using a limited range of vocabulary. But now I've found these wonderful podcasts on the Parthenon and on Greek history, and I'm having them transcribed. But I want to get to where I can understand these, because once you achieve a high level of comprehension, then your ability to speak can quickly come up, as long as you have the right attitude. And then when I go to Crete, I will be prepared. I'll have a large vocabulary, I'll have good comprehension, and even if I struggle to speak at first, I'll be able to stay in the game. Comprehension, which requires vocabulary, comprehension is the sort of number one defense. You can cope no matter what is thrown at you. You understand. You can then slowly, find ways to express what it is you want to say. Now, having said all of that and saying that comprehension is the fundamental skill, we should work on comprehension, work on doing a lot of listening and reading, work on our vocabulary. And then there are people who say, well, I understand very well, but I can't speak. When I go to speak, I can't find the words. Of course that's true. And ultimately, you have to speak a lot. And in order to speak a lot, you have to be prepared to put yourself into situations where you have trouble speaking, where you sound foolish, where you feel you don't have enough time to say what you want to say because there are 4 or 5 people speaking in this language, and you understand more or less what they're saying, and you want to say something, and then all of a sudden you think you don't have enough time and there's pressure on you, or you think you did poorly. Of course, all of that is there, and you have to be willing to put yourself through that. You have to be willing to sound less than intelligent. Be willing to expose yourself to that kind of an uncomfortable feeling. However, if you don't have comprehension, if you don't understand what people are saying, if you don't have the ability through good comprehension to enjoy books, to enjoy radio programs, to enjoy movies, all of these things which are going to increase the level of your language and things that you can do on your own, if you don't have that comprehension level, then your speaking level will never improve. So the fundamental skill is comprehension. How far you take that in terms of being able to use what might appear to some to be a passive level of knowledge, how far you take that into your speaking is entirely a matter of your own attitude. If you are prepared to expose yourself to the uncomfortable feeling of knowing that you're struggling, knowing that you're making mistakes, knowing that you haven't got enough time to say what you want to say, knowing that there are words there that you know that you can't find when you need to use them. All of these uncomfortable feelings are an absolutely integral part of language learning. So that part of it, you have to decide for yourself. But as a strategy, when I learn languages, and that's certainly the case right now with my Greek, I am focusing on improving my level of comprehension, and it is slowly improving just through the massive exposure that I'm getting through my listening and reading, and of course, working on Link. So that's why I think comprehension, you know what, I'll do the next video I will do in a mixture of these paired languages, Spanish, Portuguese, Ukrainian, Russian, and so forth, just for the fun of it. Okay, bye for now.